I'm very pleased to receive Kelly Nichols from the U.S. Office on Colombia. Thank you, Kelly, so much for visiting our Christian Aid offices. Kelly will be talking to us about the human rights situation in Colombia, as well as about an international campaign to defend the rights of human rights defenders. But first, Kelly, tell us about USOC, the U.S. Office on Colombia.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. USOC was created in 1998 with the objective of giving a permanent voice for Colombian human rights organizations in Washington. We represent the Colombian platforms and their umbrella group, which is called the Techo Común, the Common Roof, which represent thousands of human rights organizations throughout Colombia. We are also the US representative to OIDACO, which is a network of European organizations working on Colombia, and the co-chair of the Colombian Steering Committee, which represents 30 church groups, human rights organizations working on Colombia. And through this, we seek to create a joint approach and a coordinated approach to promoting human rights, the rule of law and peace in Colombia. And we also seek to inform US policymakers of the impact of US policy towards Colombia and improve that so it's more humane and human rights focused.
Mm-hmm. Now, human rights defenders are intimidated every day in Colombia. Many of them are killed. Why is this happening?
Yes, and the situation is only getting worse at the moment, sadly. Human rights defenders in Colombia risk their lives every day. They speak against powerful voices, both legal and illegal, and in doing so, they're putting their lives in grave danger. Sadly, in Colombia, the Colombian government hasn't respected the key role of human rights defenders in a democracy, and as such hasn't provided the guarantees for their work. So as a result, we're seeing stigmatizations by public government officials, including the president, baseless prosecutions. The Presidential Intelligence Agency, the DAS, has been found to be systematically spying and also harassing defenders, and with the stated aim of undermining and destabilizing their work. And all these attacks and threats against defenders remain in impunity, which obviously just exacerbates the problem. Now, at the moment, with the upcoming election, we're seeing a real increase in violence against human rights defenders. Sadly, two of our colleagues have just been killed in the past week in Colombia. And there's been massive death threats, 3 mass death threats of organizations throughout the country. So this is a really important time to be working for the protection of human rights defenders.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about your campaign to stop this.
Mm-hmm. This campaign was started because of the issues that I told you about, that our partners in Colombia told us that the situation is getting worse. There's more threats, there's more attacks, and all these other problems with lack of guarantees. And then the presidential intelligence scandal just was on the top of all of that. Then they said that it's not working just acting like responding case by case. We need a more systematic approach. So what we did, and with Christian Aid, USOC and US Office on Colombia and Christian Aid have been involved from the start. In the end of 2008, we got a group together to design this campaign. We created recommendations. The key aim of the campaign is to meet a set of recommendations for structural policy change that we believe will have a real lasting effect on improving protection for human rights defenders. And they seek to end the systematic persecution of defenders, to end the impunity for violence against defenders, baseless prosecutions, the misuse of state intelligence, and baseless prosecutions, and also to structurally improve the protection program. These recommendations were created with over 30 human rights organizations in Colombia, and to date there is over 260 organizations worldwide in 24 different countries signed on to the campaign.
Now, what would you say to the skeptics? To those people who would not believe that this campaign will achieve much?
I think with the creation of any campaign, you need to look at who's your target, in this case the Colombian government. What are you trying to achieve? We have a very well thought out recommendations. And then what is the pressure points? For the Colombian government, the pressure points US government, without a doubt, because of the huge amount of aid, the UK and the EU governments, the United Nations, and also obviously internal pressure. So we have reached out to all those different areas and are seeking to create united pressure from all these different points to reach a set of recommendations in a set amount of time. So I think it's I think there's very clear way in which to achieve them.
Mm-hmm. Has there been a highlight to the campaign?
There's been many.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one highlight is the fact that we've been able to get so many people on board, and we really have increased the visualization of this problem, not just in Colombia, but also in the United States. For example, USOC and our partners organized a congressional hearing that was very well attended on human rights defenders. We brought the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders and several Colombian defenders to testify before Congress. And that received a lot of media coverage and was very successful. We've also in the US been able to meet with very senior level Obama officials and members of the Congress to really make this a top priority for the US government. And indeed, the US government has said that it is now one of its top priorities. In Colombia, for example, they just held a special event with all the vice presidential candidates. The vice presidents are in charge of human rights policy in Colombia. And pretty much all of the vice presidential candidates came. That wouldn't have been possible before, but it was possible because there was real support from it internationally. The Colombian defenders have been able to meet with government officials, with embassy staff, senior level politicians from around the world, and through this we've really galvanized a lot of support and attention to this key issue. And I think with the amount of response and the coordinated response that you're seeing to the current threat is a real testimony to that. In the United States, because obviously I work in the US, so I can tell you a bit more about that, and now that some more examples of success have been, for example, we were successful in dropping US funding to the DAS. We were able to include special conditions on the protection of human rights defenders, which are linked to US aid to Colombia, which didn't exist beforehand. And the State Department has agreed to implement several of the recommendations that are linked to the campaign. So in general, I think there's been a lot of success in US, but also in the UK, Europe, and of course in Colombia.
That's great to hear. Have there been any obstacles, anything that's getting on the way, and perhaps are you scared of taking part in this campaign?
I think that obviously the Colombian human rights defenders, and for very good reasons, don't have any confidence in the current government, because it's under the current government that there's been this intelligence scandal, that you've had these stigmatizations, baseless prosecutions, and that all these cases just are in impunity. So as a result, any dialogue between defenders and the government has completely broken down. And that, of course, is a huge problem as far as meeting the recommendations. But I'm very hopeful that now that we're coming up to an election, that we'll be able to, under the new government, renew negotiations and reach the recommendations. As far as challenges, I mean, I think it's always challenging when you have so many people involved in a campaign to reach consensus and so forth in the development stage. But I also think equally that it's incredibly important that there is buy-in throughout Colombia. And I think the process that we went about as far as creating the recommendations and the key message really meant that people throughout the country see this campaign as their own and are very much organised through it. So while challenging, was paid off a lot. And as far as, I mean, yes, it's always dangerous to do this work, but much more so for our colleagues in Colombia, and that's what inspires us to continue and pushing for this.
Now, moving a little bit into the Colombian government support that it has received from the US. The US has given quite a lot of money to the Colombian government, despite Colombians' poor human rights record. Do you think the US policy on Colombia has changed under the administration of President Obama?
Yes, well, like you said, I mean, the US government has given over $6 billion over 8 years, so that means it has an enormous influence, both for good and for bad, over the Colombian government. We were pleased, USOC and our partners did a lot of lobbying around the initial meeting between President Obama and President Uribe in the White House mid last year, and we were very pleased that after that President Obama came out and spoke of his concerns about the DAS intelligence scandal, about extrajudicial executions, displacement, and even a re-election, which was more than we'd hoped for. And he spoke of the importance of the work of human rights defenders. So that was excellent and was clearly a break from the previous administration. However, there were some disappointments in Obama's first year, and I think that's because obviously because of domestic and international reasons, Latin America wasn't a priority, and thus a lot of the key positions, for example for human rights for Latin America, weren't appointed until the end of the year. However, this year we're seeing some very positive signs. We've had several meetings with the Deputy Secretary of State, and he's been to Colombia and he's spoken to President Uribe about concerns for human rights defenders, as has the Assistant Secretary of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour. So these concerns are going up to a very high level, which is important. And also the State Department has agreed to implement several of the key recommendations, and Congress has always been an ally. So we're seeing a definite positive shift, and I think this year and next there's a lot of room to achieve much in the United States.
Now, Colombians will soon elect a new president, and there are hopes for the Green Party candidate, Antanas Mockus. What do you think would be the impact if he was the winner?
Well, actually, USOC and some of our partners wrote a letter to the presidential candidates, and we actually, just this morning, I received a response from Dr. Mockus. And some of what he's highlighting is very positive. He seems, at least, to understand the key importance of human rights defenders, and I think due to that, and he will open up dialogue with defenders, which, as I said, under the current administration has been completely shut down. So I think there's real room, as far as the campaign is concerned, to meet these recommendations. He also has said positive things around forced displacement, extrajudicial executions, and impunity, which is great because impunity is one of our focuses, really reducing it. I'm not quite sure as far as his policies on negotiating peace, because he said some cross messages there, so that concerns me a little bit. But I think, obviously, if he were to be elected, it would be a great improvement, and we'd see some real advances in human rights.
You mentioned the issue of displacement, and why do you think so many Colombians are displaced?
Well, there's many reasons. One of the key ones is the operations of the new and old paramilitary groups throughout the country, fighting for territorial control. And we're seeing a real increase in these newly armed paramilitary groups. Also fighting between the guerrilla and the armed forces, and often the armed forces doesn't put in any kind of mechanisms beforehand to prevent displacement, as I've seen many times firsthand in Colombia. The Constitutional Court has identified the expansion of mega projects such as mining, palm oil as another reason for forced displacement. The US-funded fumigations are definitely a reason, and we're trying, and we have been quite successful in reducing the amount of fumigations. We'd like to see the program ended altogether because it's not even remotely successful. And also there's a lot of internal displacement, for example in Buenaventura, Medellin, Bogota, where due to the activity of the illegally armed groups, people move within the city.
Now, finally, what do you think is the single most important change in Colombian policy that is required to protect human rights defenders, to protect the life of human rights defenders?
I think we have to address impunity. At the moment, it is absolutely rare that a threat against a human rights defender will be investigated, let alone prosecuted. And as long as these armed groups, illegally armed groups, can go on threatening and killing human rights defenders, knowing very well that there's absolutely no ramifications, they will continue to do so. Likewise, whilst the government knows that they can speak publicly stigmatizing defenders and there will be no ramifications, they will continue to do so. If there is not investigations and prosecutions of the death scandal, not just of those who carried it out, but also of those who ordered this operation, it will continue to happen. So as far as I'm concerned, we have to address impunity because it's the way to truly protect human rights defenders. And it's one of the campaign's main focuses, and it's one of USOC's main focuses.
Kelly, how can people support the campaign?
Well, there's many ways. If you would like to get involved, we have urgent actions. Obviously, there's opportunities to write to, whether you be, if you're in the US, you can write to your member in the UK, in Colombia, Europe, wherever you are. On the website, you can learn more about the campaign. And also just getting more people to be aware of the fact that there is such a drastic situation in Colombia. I think many people have this image that Colombia is in post-conflict, which is far from the truth. So we need to really spread the word. Also writing to your editor, writing op-eds, etc.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. It's been a real pleasure to have you, and I hope and wish you every success in the campaign.
No, and thank you very much for Christian Aid, because this campaign wouldn't have gone ahead without the fundamental support of Christian Aid. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.